Hey boys and girls, I wanted to go over some of the more difficult questions from our daily workbook. The first question that we have this week that might be a little bit tricky is this: which fractions are equal to one whole? Well, let's start by taking a look at something that is one whole. This bar represents one whole. So now let's represent each of our fractions using a bar model. The fraction 1/2, we can break our whole into halves and shade one of those halves. The fraction 4/4, we can break our whole bar into fourths and shade four of those 1/4 pieces. For the fraction 2/4, we can take our whole bar, break it into fourths, and then shade two of those 1/4 pieces. And for the fraction 3/3, we can take our whole bar, break it into thirds, and then shade three of those 1/3 pieces. Based on this, we are looking at fractions that are equal to that one whole bar. That would be 4/4 is equal to one whole, and 3/3 is equal to one whole. Here's another problem that a lot of kids are getting stuck on. The question says, find three-digit numbers that have 25 tens. Well, that's some weird language there, 25 tens, and you don't hear that very often, but you will hear it in 4th grade, so let's talk about it. So instead of starting with 25 tens, I wanted to start with 200, 210, 220, 230, 240, 250. So right here you can see 250. But imagine that I didn't have those yellow 100 flats. Imagine that I only had 10 rods. Well, I could replace each of those hundreds with 10 tens. Let's take a look. This is still the same amount. It just looks a little bit different. I have 10 tens equal to 100, and then another 10 tens equal to 100. So that's still 250. Except we could also call this 25 tens. So 25 tens is equal to 250. Now we can look for numbers that begin with 250 because we know any number that has 250 in it has 25 tens. All right, here's another question that we've looked at this week. It says, color a fraction of this shape that is less than 1/4. Before we color something less than 1/4, let's start by coloring 1/4 of the circle. So right here, you can see I've changed the circle into fourths to make it easier to see, and now I shaded one of those fourth-sized pieces. Now that we've looked at 1/4 of this circle, it's easy for us to find something smaller or less than 1/4. And let's change it back, and we can color one of those eighth size pieces because 1/8 is smaller or less than 1/4. All right, now for the one that gives everybody the most trouble, missing numbers. Now, remember, multiplication and division are related. So if division is tricky for you, you can think of that opposite operation, multiplication. Let's start with this first problem. 49 divided by something gives me 7. Well, let's start by representing 49. Now, I know I need to divide this into equal groups, but yikes, I don't know how many equal groups. 49 divided by some amount gives me 7 in each group. Well, let me go ahead and just put 7 in each group and see how many groups I get. Okay, so I have my groups of 7. Oh, well look, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I ended up having 7 groups of 7. So that tells me 49 divided by 7 will give me 7. But if I have a hard time thinking of it this way, I can also think about it as multiplication. And I can say 7 times something will give me 49. And then I can remember, oh yeah, 7 times 7 gives me 49. Now, If this one's a stumper for you, it's probably because that equal sign isn't where you're expecting it to be. Well, you can actually flip this problem around to make it easier to look at without changing anything. So instead of saying 4 is equal to 28 divided by something, you can say 28 divided by something is equal to 4. All right, now that we've flipped this problem around, hopefully it's a little bit easier for you. Now let's solve it. So we have 28 dots. We're going to divide them into some number of groups. I don't know how many, but when we divide them into this number of groups, we end up getting 4 in each group. So let me start by putting 4 in each group. And then this will tell me how many groups I made. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I made 7 groups. So 28 divided by 7 will give me 4.